Thank you so much. All right, so we could probably get rid of that guy now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tableau Tuesday. This month, we're going to be working with sets and parameters. So a couple of housekeeping things as usual. If you are currently on mute, that's a good thing. You come into this meeting by default muted. So we do ask that you stay on that. But that being said, if you have any questions for us along the way, feel free to hop into that Q&A section in the WebEx. You can find that by going to that three-dot ellipsis in the WebEx menu and going down to Q&A. So again, don't go into that chat. We see that the Q&A is a lot better for answering your questions succinctly and easily. So feel free to hop into that. But most importantly, welcome. If you've joined us before, I'm glad you're coming back. And if this is your first one, I'm really glad that you're here. So Tableau Tuesday is your solution engineers locally spotlighting different tools in Tableau that you can kind of learn a little bit more about and hopefully start to leverage. So a couple of quick introductions on our side first. That's me. My name is Brianna Newman. I'm one of the senior solution engineers over here at Tableau. I'm currently based in the Los Angeles area, but I suppose as of now, everyone's working from home, so we're all over the country. So also on the line, we have Steve Martinez. He's the Director of Solution Engineering over here in the West, and a couple others that are helping out on the Q&A. I wanted to give a quick thank you to them as well today. Eric Teutsch, Scott DeVillers, and Rob Levine. They're going to be answering your questions as they come up. So a thank you to them before we get started as well. So before we get too deep into our discussion today, I did want to do a little bit of framing. So this might seem a little roundabout, but I suppose if you hang in there, there is a point, I promise. So I actually didn't grow up in California. I live in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is Garden of the Gods. It's a really scenic area. Definitely a quirky city, and I can say that because I grew up there. Everyone is free to kind of talk about their hometowns that way, I suppose. But I actually lived on the northern part of the city and attended a high school on the southern part of the city. So every day I would drive 20 minutes, and in that time I would pass this building twice a day. This is the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. And this is where they train athletes for the Olympics. They have dorms for the athletes, and it's not uncommon to run into some of the athletes in and around Colorado Springs. Once we saw Michael Phelps at a Chipotle, and it was pretty much the coolest thing that happened to me up to that point at the age of 17. So they like to train athletes here because of the high elevation, gives them a biological advantage with red blood cells. But also, as we were around Colorado Springs growing up, we would come into contact with this building as well. So the Olympics are very prominent, very present in Colorado Springs and kind of my growing up. So when given the prompt to start working with sets and parameters today, I was given the option to kind of think about an overall theme. So given kind of the circumstances of the world right now and the Olympics being rescheduled, I really wanted to work with Olympic data, both because I'm desperately missing the Olympics this year because they've been rescheduled, and also Olympic data is a lot of fun to work with, especially for sets and parameters. So that's a little bit of background about the data we're going to be working with, why we're going to be working with it, and also a heads up that there are a number of Olympic puns coming your way. I apologize in advance. I simply just cannot resist. So quick agenda today, a little light on the content. We're really going to spend a fair amount of time in Tableau doing that demo. So we're going to start off with, why are we talking about sets of parameters in the first place? What is the question that they are aiming to answer? And then also, why are we talking about them now? You know, we've kind of studied this and presented it quite a lot over the years. So why are we talking about it now? And I will let you know what that is. So we'll then go into working with sets and parameters, and then demo sets, parameters, and then both. So kind of nice segue here. I wanted to start with some questions that we often get as a team that kind of lend themselves to using sets and parameters. So this one is a common one that we get. I want to empower my users and my viewers to direct their own analyses. How do I support a dashboard with seemingly endless possibilities? Or in not so many words, and one of my favorites, I want to make one dashboard. I don't want to make 17. So this is kind of where sets and parameters come in. Tableau is at a very interesting juncture of being very analytical and also very artistic. So our goal is to never limit either of those factors. We want to enable you to have a very flexible and dynamic analysis without limiting your users in however they feel they should approach it. So doing my kind of free association, if you would, on sets and parameters, a lot of the words I kept coming back with is dynamic, flexible, and powerful. And this kind of relates directly to our Olympic theme today. These athletes are, of course, the embodiment of power, flexibility, and being dynamic. So that's kind of my connection. But what does this mean for you? Why should you start using sets and parameters? Well, foremost, it's going to allow you to spend less time trying to cover as many use cases as possible. You can create one dashboard that will suit a number of different use cases. And then you can also answer a lot of questions through self-service rather than having to answer them yourself. So if a lot of your users want to see the data in a particular way, they can drill down into that dashboard and find that information that they're interested in. So in conclusion, this is going to reduce the amount of mind reading that you have to do for your viewers. I never really got any good at mind reading. If you got pretty good at it, I envy you. But this is going to reduce your reliance on having to read minds and disappoint anyone that doesn't communicate their thoughts to you clearly. So that kind of goes into why are we talking about sets and parameters now? So in the last 2 years, so Tableau does quarterly based software releases. And in the last 2 years, we haven't done a single release that did not touch on sets or parameters in some form. So what this means is we've been adding new functionality, we've been perfecting existing functionality, and we've been kind of listening to any of those feature requests, app stands, things like that, that all of our customers have been asking for over time. So we've been making a lot of changes and a lot of improvements. So the sets and parameters you used a year ago are probably going to look a lot different than the ones that are in there today. So this might lead you to that last question. Maybe you're thinking, oh, dang, there's been a lot of changes. When was the last time I updated my Tableau? So there's two possible reactions to this. Either you're on top of the world, you're feeling great, everything's up to date, I can use all of the features that I might mention today. Or alternatively, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm on version 2018. So hopefully you are the former rather than the latter, but as always, try to keep up to date with Tableau because we're always adding new functionality. All right, so we have now reached the part of the presentation where I start making some Olympic puns. So ready, set, sets. This is obviously a volleyball set, and we are not working with that today. So these are the sets that we are working with today. So you can use sets to compare and ask questions about a subset of data. Sets are custom fields that define a subset of data based on some conditions. I bolded some simply because oftentimes sets don't have a nice, clean, and neat way of cutting the information. And I'll have some examples later on. But there's several relatives in this family tree of sets, which includes set actions, set control, and combining sets. So set actions is going to be clicking directly into that dashboard, selecting points, things like that. Excuse me. And then set control is going to be more like a filter interaction. So clicking checkboxes to add members into sets or removing them from sets, kind of like a filter interaction. And then if you have several sets, you can do some functionality around combining sets and getting that inside of the Venn diagram of two separate sets. So we'll mainly be working with set actions today. If you were able to see the What's New in Tableau Tableau Tuesday, I think it was a couple months ago, I actually demoed the set control. This is brand new as of 2020.2, I believe. So if you want to take a look at that, that is on our YouTube channel as well. So I felt in approaching this demo that sets are largely underutilized, and I started to wonder why that was. And the conclusion I came to through no scientific method whatsoever, just my own hunch and gut feeling, is that they're kind of conceptually hard to define. Filters are easy because they fit within a nice category. Highlighting is, well, obviously highlighting. So in an effort to try and pin down what a set is, I came up with a couple of analogies that might help conceptualize what a set is doing. So sets are like inviting different groups of friends to your birthday party. I hope everyone out there has fallen victim to this and how awkward it can be when you invite someone from different circles of friends to your birthday party to all hang out and have some sort of common interest. And sometimes that's not always the case. So the only thing that is the common connective thread in that case is that you invited them to your birthday party. Of course, we can still run some information on these individuals. We can see what's their average age, what's the gender breakdown of the group. Maybe you can see, if you wanted to make some sort of financial data, you can see what the average amount of cash everyone has in their pockets maybe. That might not go over so well at your birthday party. They might think that you're trying to rob them. But the point is you can run a lot of different analytics on different groups. Same goes for something like a used car dealership. They might not all have the same make. They might be a moped, they might be a car, but you can still do some analysis on how many miles are on that vehicle. What's the financing look like? What color is it? So even though they aren't of the same category, you can still do some analysis on them. Same thing goes for making a grocery list. Maybe you're getting all food. Maybe you also need to buy some light bulbs or something like that. But you can still run some statistics on what exactly you're buying. Other examples might be picking teams for kickball. This one felt like kind of an obvious one, and in the interest of not unearthing my childhood trauma, we'll just leave that one as it is. But the last one, staying in theme, is that sets are like the independent Olympic athletic team. So this is the team of athletes that don't have a country to compete with, but still want to compete in the Olympics. So this might be because of politics. It might be because of maybe some upheaval in their country. But sets are kind of like the independent Olympic athlete team. So this is kind of what happens with your sets when you're putting them all together and running your analysis. They're happy to be there. They're having a great time. So sets are like the independent Olympic team. So there's a lot of popular use cases for sets. I'm not going to read through all of them, but we'll be going through a couple of these. We have some pretty thorough documentation on all of these in some of our Tableau blogs. So if anything I say today resonates with you, I encourage you to kind of look into those and start playing around. But now it's time for the other part of our dynamic duo, which is parameters. And unfortunately, I don't have a nice pun for this title slide, but I promise you that it is coming. So what are parameters? A parameter is a global placeholder value, such as a number, a date, or a string, that can replace a constant value in a calculation, filter, or reference line. So if you remember algebra, parameters are like x. You determine what x is, they'll filter through a calculation, and then it will change that mark in the view. So that being said, parameters really need calculations. If I could rename the title of this presentation, it would be sets and parameters with the help of calculations. So parameters need a calculation to be useful. Without a calculation, a parameter is like a dial that is not connected to anything. Or if we're staying in theme, a parameter without a calculation is like skiing without snow. You really aren't going to go anywhere. So parameters can replace any normal dimension or measure in a calculation, and showing the parameter control makes the marks in that view configurable. Using several different parameters within your view can also help the viewer customize the data that they're interested in. So, like most things in Tableau, it's usually best to see these things in action. I mean, we're in this to help people see and understand their data, and that has an extra emphasis on see. So let's go ahead and jump into Tableau. So a quick tour of my data I am using today. I'm using 3 different data sources. The first of which is the Summer Olympic medals that have been awarded. So again, only summer, no winter, and then from 76 to 2008. It's a pretty rich data set. It has the event, the discipline, the individual, what city they competed in, and also what country they come from. So that's a fun data set. We're going to take a look at that to try and compare different countries and their success in the Olympics. Also, we have some data around the host cities over time. So we have 2 different data sets here. One data set had really great latitude and longitude data, and the other data set had some pretty robust features around what type of games they were, whether it was summer games, winter games, youth games, Paralympic games, things like that. The third data set we're going to be using is actually data about the athletes themselves biologically. So we're going to use this to try and compare height and weight ratios in different genders and different sports. So that'll be a fun one. So moving right along here, we'll start with our Olympic medalist data. So let's start kind of slow. Let's say we want to see the medals awarded over time. Okay, that's a pretty nice little line graph. We'll see over time they've started awarding more medals, so that's great. There's probably more events, more athletes, more genders that are being included, so this makes sense. But let's say we want to look at particular years and see how the breakdown of those medals goes into each country. So with this, we could add a set right off the bat. So let's create a set for the year. So this will allow us to highlight some years and take a look and drill down into those countries. So this is kind of preparing for our next step. So our next view, after we rename this one, I'll name this medals over years, another view. And then here we'll want to take a look at country, and we'll look at medal count. So we can make that a tree map. I don't use tree maps very often, but I kind of like it for this use case. And then maybe we'll put that medal count on labels to make it a little bit more evident. So this is all of time. Since we want to only take a look at the years that we select in this first view, we'll want to go ahead and take that year set and put it on filters. So when I do that, you'll see my view changes. And that's because the point I have selected here is 1988. So this is what the year 1988 looks like. So let's bring these 2 items together into one view. Actually, let's rename this, try and stay neat. So we'll say countries and medals. Great. So now we can grab our medals over time and then our countries, put it in the bottom. We'll get rid of this since we have a label, and then we'll make this a full view so we can see the whole thing. Okay, great. So one more thing here. Since we have that set living in filter, but it's only on the worksheet level, when I click on this first view at the top, it's not going to interact with anything. So we do need to add a dashboard action. So a quick rule of thumb, if you're only viewing that sheet on the sheet level, it is a sheet action. If you're wanting it to interact between sheets in a dashboard, then it's going to be a dashboard action. So we'll click on set values, and this step should look a little bit familiar if you use highlight or filtering. So we'll actually call this set years maybe, and we'll choose to trigger our sets with medals over years. We'll choose the set of year set, and then I'll add values to set when we click and then remove them when we unclick. So I'll click OK, and one more time. So now when I highlight each of these items, we'll see our view change below. So over the years of 1980 all the way up to 1992, this is how many medals each of these countries have earned. So I think that's great. I think it looks pretty good, but I think those lines could be a little bit more exciting. So I'm going to do a little bit of reference line work just to kind of enrich our view. So I want to create a band that has a reference line from the first point I choose and the last point I choose. So in order to pull out that start date, we'll start a calculation here. So we'll start date. And what this will be is an if-then statement doing a date truncation of the year. So if that doesn't make any sense, hang with me for just a moment. So we're going to start with a minimum and then an if-then statement. So if we are using our year set, then date truncation. So this is going to grab one part of that date. You know, there's month, day, year. We just want the year. So quote year, that's the date part. And then grab the actual variable of year and then click end. Okay, we're seeing that that calculation is valid. Thank goodness, I always wonder. So this is going to grab that minimum date of what we select, and then we'll copy this actually, make a duplicate, and then we'll change that to max. So this will be our end date. Excellent. So these are capturing the first date we select and the last date that we select. One last thing, we want to make these continuous so we can add them in our reference lines. And then add them to the view. End date, start date. So then we can pull pull these through with our reference lines. So going into analytics, reference band onto year. And here we can kind of configure those settings. So we'll want to band from the start date to the end date, and we'll change that label to the value so we know what date we're actually selecting without having to hover rather than the computation. And we'll maybe make this line stand out a little bit. We'll make it orange, and maybe we'll make that background a little bit darker. And click OK. So once we click back to this dashboard, we'll see that we have this nice dotted orange line. So it's going to call out to us what years we are selecting and what years we aren't. So in case there's any sort of ambiguity in your view about what set you're using, these reference lines can really call attention to that and ensure that the viewer is aware that they're only looking at a couple of the years rather than all of the years. So sets in this case really fun for drilling down and also creating an accumulation of metals. So another use case I thought of is using, let's see here, we want to stay with our Olympic medal data. So Tableau is really great with hierarchies. Let's see here. So if we wanted to look at different disciplines of medals and we wanted to drill down from discipline to event, we can always drill down using that plus and minus in the hierarchy. However, the problem with this is that it expands everything. Categories such as athletics is going to have a lot of events within it, and it's going to do that for every single discipline that we select. So I was wondering if maybe we could selectively expand and contract these, especially since there's kind of a lot of data that needs to be broken down. So kind of leading where we're going to go ahead and create another set. So since we want that set to be based on discipline, we'll right-click on discipline, create, and then set. So we will call this discipline set. Click OK. And we can actually pull this onto the view as a helper. So we'll see that everything is technically seen as out. So nothing is in my set right now. Again, no one is on my kickball team, for example. So this will be kind of our helper as we work through this. Excuse me. So one more calculation. Again, the presentation secondary title is parameters sets with the help of calculations. We'll create one more calculation, and this will be the discipline trigger. This is what's going to trigger that event. So we'll say one more if then. So if we're using discipline set, then we're going to return the event. Else, otherwise, we will return nothing, end. So what this calculation is saying, if if a member of the set is in the discipline set, then we will return the event. If we have not added that discipline into our set, then it will stay collapsed. So we'll go ahead and click OK here. And we'll actually get rid of event. So we do need one more step here. We can't just start clicking on our view and expecting things to expand and contract. So again, rule of thumb, since we're working with a set, we're going to go to Worksheet, Action, Add Action. This will get very familiar by the end of this, I promise. We'll call this the event drill down and focus on sheet 3, the only sheet we're working with right now, and then focus on the discipline set. We'll add values to the set when we click on, and then when we click off, it will remove those values from the set and reset our view. So we'll click OK one more time. And so now when we go, let's go ahead and expand out athletics. Let's see. Looks like it didn't quite take, maybe I missed a click. Discipline set, that's what we want. Add or move, okay. Might have missed. Let's take a look here. We have our discipline set, select from list. Looks good. Our in out, oh, silly me, I forgot to add this to the view. That is crucial. So that's what happens when you start doing things live. So when we click on athletics, this is actually what's supposed to happen. So it's going to expand those out into their prospective disciplines or events, actually. So we can see that, okay, not all of these medals are just at this level of detail. We can also drill down and see additional levels of detail. So ultimately, you do see that the in and out trigger changes. So that little helper changes whenever we click on a member. So, sorry, excuse me. We could actually get rid of this. We don't need it as a helper anymore. And then you can do some formatting on this header. Maybe you can make it white, add some directions. So when they click on these, it will expand out and you don't see that discipline trigger header. So this view will actually come back towards the end of the demo. We're going to use it again when we switch our sheets in our dashboard. So say ta-ta for now, but we will be seeing this one again. All right, so using our second data source here, we're going to be working with host city data. So I was curious about whether there were any relationships around where host cities were located and what type of Olympics they would host, and also if there was any difference in athlete attendance. So we'll go ahead and create a map of our host cities and grab, let's see here. There we go, city through detail. Okay, so now we have all of these host cities that have hosted the Olympics over time. I did notice this morning that Lake Placid was put into Florida. That is not accurate, but I didn't quite get into the data to fix it. So I do know that Florida has not hosted an Olympics. It is kind of a funny tidbit. So we'll go ahead and color code these by type. And we'll see there's several different types here. We're going to exclude the youth games, and we're going to exclude nulls. The nulls actually come from countries that actually don't exist anymore, such as West Germany, Yugoslavia, kind of interesting artifacts of history. So now I don't think that we should use red for the Winter Games. It's not very intuitive, so we'll change that to blue. Florida hosting a Winter Olympics, very bold. So we will go ahead and add athletes, and we'll put that on 5. So we'll see the number of athletes that tend to go to these types of Olympics. So we're kind of already seeing a relationship. We'll see that overall Winter Olympics are less attended by athletes, and the Summer Olympics tend to have more athletes. So one thing that I want to kind of explore and drill into is being able to highlight this map and see the cities on that on more of a bar graph, so we can see the difference between a dot that's this big and a dot that's this big. So we're going to be working with a city set. I need to be careful saying that, so we might name it something different. We will call it set of cities instead. Set of cities, click OK. And then we'll make some follow-up views. So maybe something that's kind of related to our map, but not duplicating that information. So we'll do athletes by city. Get rid of those nulls. Order from top to bottom, and then we'll color code these so it makes sense. Let's see here, type, color. Then we'll see there's some overlap with the youth games. So we'll exclude that. We won't look at youth games today. All right, so already there's kind of a relationship that's emerging from my data, especially since the top patroned cities are all Summer Olympics, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. So we're going to do set of cities onto the filter, and we'll see that it disappears because I don't have anything set up yet. One more item, I do want to make a floating kind of scoreboard for how many athletes have attended in all of those cities that we select. So we're just going to grab athletes, pull it onto the view, and do a little bit of formatting. And maybe make it a little bit bigger so it's not going to blend into the background. Yeah, that's plenty big. And then we will add our filter as well, our set of cities. All right, so jumping into a dashboard, I've been remiss on naming my views, so maybe I'll catch up on that quick. So we'll call this event, drill down. I believe this is my host city map. This is my athlete host city view. And then this is, we'll call it scoreboard. All right. So we'll go ahead and drag these out into the view. Have our host city and then our scoreboard. We'll actually float that scoreboard. Chances are good I'm going to forget that that's on floating later on. So when that happens, you can laugh at me and I won't feel that bad. So here we have our scoreboard, our athlete host city. So now we just need to set up that set action that's going to make it so when I select items on that map, we'll see that information propagated below. So working with a dashboard, we'll want to set up a dashboard action. So add action, set values, and we want to trigger it with the host city map. You select the other one, and the set we're working with is set of cities. These are usual triggers and click OK. So now maybe we'll do a lasso. So we can lasso around the European cities, and then we'll see it drills down into the attendance of athletes for all those cities that I select. So it's not really a surprise because we already peeked at the data that Summer Olympics are often more, have more athletes that attend them. But a view such as this is going to allow us to kind of have a different perspective on our data, one of which being the equator is probably around here. So there's 2 cities that have hosted Summer Olympics in what is actually their winter. So these games both took place in normal summer months for the Northern Hemisphere, but they hosted these games when it was actually their winter. So I think that's kind of curious. But another bit of trivia to keep in mind is Winter Olympics are often don't have as many athletes in them and are often underrepresented by a number of countries. And again, my own speculation, no scientific method really with this, is there's a huge barrier to entry for winter sports. Think of it this way. If you are a runner and it's wintertime, you have the option to run on a treadmill or you have the option to run indoors. Whereas if you are a skier and it is summer, you can't just go to a gym and go down a ski hill. So there's a number of barriers to entry, both for countries to have facilities and means for putting, did I lose audio? No, we're good. Putting their athletes in facilities that they can train and improve in their craft. So those are a couple of the relationships that I've kind of speculated on through this. But overall, this is a great use to take a map and add drill down information and analyze your data points. That flirted spot still makes me laugh. Okay, so that kind of wraps up our little bit on sets. Again, we will come back to this briefly at the end. But next, I want to take a look at the athletes themselves. We've looked at the medals, we've looked at the host cities. But now I'm kind of curious about the athletes themselves. So we'll work with the height and weight data. So here we'll add height, and we'll add weight, and then we'll add name. So this will give us a crazy scatter plot with quite a bit of mess in the middle. Don't worry, this is going somewhere, I promise. And there's a number of nulls. Those are just for individuals that don't have either height or weight data registered for them. So just an FYI. So there's a huge mass of athletes that have attended the Rio Olympics, and I'm curious how that kind of breaks down. So maybe I'm curious how they are different based on biological sex. So we can see female, they kind of have a spread, but they're kind of grouped in this area of the graph. We can also take a look at male. There's an even larger spread of size of body and weight. You don't really need a BI tool to know these things, but it's kind of fun to drill into different countries, especially to see if they're different. So maybe I'll add a filter for nationality, and we will collapse that because it is big and bulky. So if I wanted to, I could reduce this down and only look at countries that I'm interested in. We'll say USA just because that's where we are at right now. So we can see, okay, the spread is kind of the same. But what I ultimately want to do is maybe I don't want to stick with biological sex type of data. Maybe I'm curious about what sport they play. I wonder if different body sizes tend to correlate with the sports that they play. So right off the bat, we see aquatics kind of grouped. We have athletics, which is all over the chart. There's such a variety of events in athletics that this is likely the case. And then just kind of clicking through these is a little bit fun. So look at how those different body sizes change. Volleyball players tend to be really tall. That makes sense. But let's say maybe I don't want to choose between comparing what sport they play based or compare how their body types change based on biological sex. So in this particular view, what I want to do is create a parameter that's going to allow me to switch between these two kind of measuring lenses, and then have a calculation that parses that information out. So first things first, we're going to create a parameter. For the first time in the demo, we're going to create our first parameter. So we will call this the color switcher. Keep in mind, if you wanted to switch this onto rows or columns, you can do that as well. I'm just going to use it to switch color, so I'll call it the color switcher. And then we'll add a list and we'll make it a string. So here we will say sport. And it is important to spell things right consistently. And then we'll put sex as well because that's our variable name. And those are going to be what we're toggling between. So we'll say, okay, so proving my point, at risk of belaboring a little bit, I can turn on that parameter and switch it back and forth. But of course, we're skiing on grass right now. We don't have our calculation, so we're going to go nowhere pretty fast. So we need a calculation. And this particular type of calculation is my favorite. So it's going to be our color switcher calculation, and it's going to be a case calculation. If I've had a call with you recently, I've probably mentioned this at least once, but the case calculation is going to connect our parameters that we just entered, we just typed in, and it's going to connect them to the actual variables in our data. So in the case that we are using our color switcher parameter, when we say sex, we mean biological sex, then sex the actual variable. When sport, then sport. So this is connecting those parameters that we just typed in and connecting them to the pills. And then end. Good to go. Okay, so now that I have that calculation, I can use that in the view to actually do something. So now rather than having sport or biological sex on color, I can add my color switcher on color, and we can now switch back and forth between sport. I'm going to drag this to the top so it doesn't move. Sport, or I could go to biological sex, and I can switch back and forth. And adding a little bit more of interactivity, I can even drill down for countries that I'm interested in and see maybe if I were choosing these geographically, maybe I could see if I could identify any relationships for any of these countries together, or I could just change them over to what sports and kind of analyze my data that way. Again, a lot of data points, but it's kind of a fun way to sift through your data in ways that your viewers might be interested in. Maybe you have viewers that are interested in sports, but not in the gender breakdown, and vice versa. Oh, sorry, I just saw that actual, I usually don't look at the chats, but I did see that chat come through. And let's see here, and I will show that one more time. So that is case with the parameter. When you have that label for the parameter, then connect it to the actual variable in your data. So I did just peek at that chat. I usually don't do that, but I'm happy to show you. Okay, so this is our case calculation. All right, so we're actually arriving at our last view we're going to build. So it's going to bring a couple of different elements together along with that event drill down that we saw before. But what I started with was, what if we could use a map to function as a filter for the other views in our dashboard, number one. And number two, what if I had two different audiences that I'm serving for the dashboard that I'm making, but they aren't really related and screen real estate is a little bit tight. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to create a parameter and a calculation together because they're best friends. And we're going to use this to switch sheets on a dashboard so you can choose one or the other, and then you aren't squeezing in a lot of views into one dashboard, especially if you're speaking to two different audiences. So we'll start pretty easy. We'll go ahead and click on countries and get an idea of all the countries that have sent athletes to the Olympics in Rio. And I kind of prefer the fill map. We had a point map, we'll go with fill. And maybe we'll change this to a lighter color so we can have something a little bit different. Center it here. And then we'll add some labels so we don't have a very tough geography lesson later. So we have our map, presto. So let's name this map. And that's going to be our filter. So we'll name it map filter. So next, we're going to create, I don't want a dashboard. I do want a sheet. There we go. So we're going to create a view that's relatively similar to the first view that we made with medals over years, but maybe I'm interested in how that's broken down for different genders over time. So we'll have year, and our medal count. My click and drags are not super precise today, and we'll switch those around. And lastly, we'll want to put gender on color, and maybe we'll change those colors to have better contrast. Better colors, and maybe we'll make men blue and women orange. Best for those who might be colorblind. Okay, so this is going to show us our data broken out into two different lines, different genders over time. So we do see that women overall are gaining on the men, which are relatively consistent. This could be due to other countries starting to allow women to compete in the games, but we'll probably get there with our view when we start to build that out. Okay, so coming back to our map filter, we do want this to be our filter for our views. So we'll go ahead and add a country set. We have a set of cities, but now we're going to have a country. I'm going to add a set, country set. We'll click OK. And next, we'll add that filter for that set onto our filters, and it's going to disappear. Or actually, what do I need to do? I actually don't want this. I want to make a parameter. Sorry. Once you get thinking about sets, you think everything is a set. So we're actually going to create a parameter. Again, we're going to be switching those sheets based on what parameter and use that parameter in a calculation. The calculation will be a filter. So bear with me, we will get there. So we'll go ahead and add this parameter. We'll call this the sheet switcher. Add it as a list, make it a string. And since we're on our line chart right now, we'll call this line chart. And then secondarily, we'll have a bar chart. There we go. So again, this is kind of an interesting loophole. I feel I've been harping on the fact that a parameter needs a calculation in order to do anything, and this is a funny little loophole that we've found. So in order to make this parameter switch things, we need to put it into a calculation, sheet switch calc, and we are literally just going to put sheet switcher as the parameter into our calculation. So this calculation is really just a catalyst to get that parameter to be able to go somewhere on this view. So that's a fun little loophole. If you ever just need to use a parameter as a parameter and nothing fancy with a calculation, you can just put it into a calculation and use that calculation pill. So FYI. So we have our parameter on our calculation. So now we're actually going to put it on filters. Before we do that, we're actually going to turn on our parameter. So we'll see it's set to line chart, and we have our line chart. So we'll want to put our calculation here, turn it on for line chart since that's what's selected, click OK. And then we'll come back to our event drill down. That's going to be the other sheet we're going to be using in our sheet switching. So we'll put our sheet switching calculation. Cancel out there. We need to switch this over to our bar chart since we're working with a bar chart. Sheet switch calculation, and now we can select bar chart. Okay, so we have everything set up for success. Let's go ahead and build that dashboard. So we'll want to add our map. Oh no, it's I told you that was going to happen. I always have it on floating and I forget. So we have our map filter. And this next part is very important for when you're switching your sheets. What you'll want to do is actually add a container. So this container is going to be a little bit more intelligent than just tiling together views on your dashboard. Especially when you're switching them, it's going to try and give screen real estate to the one that's actually showing something. So we'll go ahead and add sheet 9. Again, I followed behind in naming my, my sheets. But we'll go ahead and drag our 2 sheets that we want to ultimately show and hide into that view. So right off the bat, we'll see it's trying to give the screen real estate to each of these, but because sheet 9 has its title turned on, it's not going to fully disappear. So to fix that, we can go to that dropdown, hide that title, and then our event drill down is going to take precedence in the view. However, if we switch this back to a line chart, they're going to try and share again. So we need to turn off the title for the bar chart as well. And there you go. So now just a couple of other items. We can add a filter. So we can start kind of exploring maybe, let's see how Brazil has broken down. It's 2 different categories of people with their medals over time. So we'll see that up till prior to 1996, women either did not excel in the Olympic Games for Brazil, or they weren't allowed to even participate. So we'll see that they're now catching up pretty darn well. So it's kind of an interesting study in the cultures of the map, of the items that we choose on the map. We can choose more northern countries, more Eurocentric countries, and kind of see how those relationships change. But also, if we switch this back to a bar chart, we can see how these medals change for different countries as well. And kind of taking this one step further, if we do click on these, they aren't going to do anything quite yet. Again, if you remember, we added the set action on the worksheet rather than the dashboard. So if I were to click on this, it wouldn't do much. So bringing this all back full circle, I can go ahead and add a dashboard action. Go into our set. We are interested in making the map filter our trigger. I don't think so. I think we want to do that event drill down. That's true. And then we'll go to discipline set and add our normal settings. And now, if we click on our different categories, they should expand out. So I can go into maybe Russia. I can, maybe I'm not interested in swimming for Russia. Maybe I'm more interested in, I don't know, wrestling. And we can take a look at the wrestling breakdown of medals for Russia. So we started with just a bunch of data in a pile, and we've arrived at this place where we can switch what type of data we're looking at, whether it's kind of a a social equality type of data, or we can even look at their success in the Olympics in the last couple of decades based on what we select in this map. So we can expand out swimming if we want to, and then we can switch over to our line chart and see how egalitarian those two genders are in their competition. So bringing this all for full circle, we used a bunch of steps, a couple of parameters, and along the way we forgot that floating was on. So using these together, you can create a very dynamic dashboard that is completely configurable depending on what your audience wants. They can maybe choose of a number of different sheets that they want to look at and have those filters in place and kind of rice through those sheets that they're interested in, and you don't have to create 17 dashboards. So coming right back to our presentation here, we just have a couple of other items to wrap up. Of course, this is all being recorded. We're going to post it onto our Tableau Tuesday YouTube channel here the next couple week or so. So if you do want to rewatch this, you absolutely can. But if you want to get started with sets and parameters already, and you think that they're going to make your life easier, there's a lot of resources out there to help you get started and find some inspiration. So for me, starting this, I really looked through the Tableau community to see how users, not people that work at Tableau necessarily, people who are using Tableau in their everyday lives, how they're using sets and parameters. Also, I looked at the Tableau blogs. There's a lot of really good information on the Tableau blogs. And then also YouTube. These types of features are very visual and very good to play with. And you can find a lot of people who have found some good use cases even on YouTube. So I guess right now I might pull it over to Steve. Steve, are there any kind of lingering questions we could get answered?
Let's see. I was just wrapping up a couple of things, and looks like some new questions came across. One is, can you use sets and parameters to switch between data sources? No, you wouldn't be able to switch a visualization between data sources. But you can do what Brianna said, which is create two visualizations against two different data sources and then switch between those. That's one way that you can take care of that. Let's see. And it looks like, Sasha, it looks like maybe you're asking if there's a way to actually treat a set like its own distinct data source. No, you can't do that, but you could use, if you wanted to, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say Tableau Prep could be a great way to do that. You would build the condition of your set in a prep flow, which will then spit out another data source, and then you can take it from there. We're getting a lot of, and I see my inbox already starting to fill up, which is great. I'm getting a lot of questions about wanting the workbook. So Brianna, if you can share the workbook with me, and I'll pass it on. If anybody wants the workbook that we've used today, just email me. I just put my email address in the chat. Brianna, if you can say, well, let's see. Parameter actions is new in 2018.3, or I'm sorry, set actions. I'm trying to remember when parameter actions came about. But if you can try to save your workbook in kind of the lowest version possible where everything will still work, because that'll satisfy the majority of the people. I know a lot of people on the line aren't on 2020.2, for instance, right now. So, but email me and I'll send you the workbook. And as always, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/Tableau Tuesday, and you'll see, as Brianna said, hopefully later this week, early next, you'll see this presentation up on that YouTube channel, along with all the ones that we've done over the last year and a half. And we're actually going to start putting even more content that's not related to any webinars, just something else that would help you guys level up your Tableau knowledge. So be sure to subscribe to that YouTube channel, so that way when new content gets put up there, you're notified, and then you can go out and watch it. I think think that was it. Let me look and see if there's anything else. Well, Sherry had asked about, can you demo just, and I was too busy answering questions, so I don't know if you did it, but using a combined set, like how you do to actually create a combined set.
Let's see here. We do have about 2 minutes left. So how about this? I will be able to make that combined set in the demo workbook we used today, and maybe an accompanying video. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time and not run over. So I'll go ahead and include that with any of the information we're sending as a follow-up. How does that sound?
I think that would be perfect. And then Simon, you had a
Oh.
question just around, can we use parameters to determine defaults for use in Tableau Server, like showing a defined set according to user type? I don't believe that that is possible. But combining row level security with sets may get you there. Simon, if you could email me smartinez@tableau.com. This is to Simon Chan, and let me think about that. And I probably have to mock up something, and then we can walk through it together. But other than that, I think we've answered all the questions.
All right, sounds fantastic. And of course, I'm happy to include, I might, just because I'm really excited about this data, I have both a template and then I have the built workbook. So even if you want to use these 3 Olympic data sources as test data, I think they're honestly fantastic. You get longitudinal data, you get hierarchical data, you get a lot of categorical data and measures. So I think it might be my new favorite data set to work with for just test data and learning how things work. So I might get a little crazy and include both the template with the data sources, blank workbook for you to play in, and the one that we played with today. We'll see what I end up doing. But that kind of brings us to our last slide. I wanted to thank everyone for jumping on. I wanted to thank my team for answering questions. And I wanted to thank all of you coming and giving us a visit and listening, learning, engaging. It makes this job a lot of fun. So that's all we got for you. That's a wrap. And I hope you have an incredible Tuesday. And we'll be in touch as soon as we can. Have a fantastic day.